only we've only gotten our second Pride Month coming up next month, but our Pride 2-4 ERG, we've made some incredible strides so far in terms of the company. One of our big ones, it may not seem that big to a lot of people, but to us it was huge. We now have the ability to put pronouns on our name tags. And we found that really has helped bring attention to a lot of different things just by having that there. So it's a small thing, but it's actually a very big thing. Having screensavers focusing on LGBTQ plus members, team members, as well as members in the company at all the workstations has been incredible, and also encouraging people to wear Pride t-shirts during Pride Month. So we've made a lot of strides in terms of making sure that the LGBTQ plus community is represented and is visible in all of our clubs.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Those are huge strides. I heard you say, it may not seem that big of a stride to many people, but I think those are really huge strides, especially at an organization like yours. Matthew, I saw you nodding along as well too. Tell me from your perspective, what are some examples of how your ERG has influenced your company to support LGBTQIA plus employees all year long?
There we go. I was like, it won't let me do it. Technology is always against us. So yeah, no, that's a really great question. I have the opportunity to help oversee the ERGs and work with the ERG leaders. And being an organization of about 250 folks right now at TextNow, it's been great to see it really grow over the past year. And with our ERG this year, it's really around Pride 365. So not doing it just in June, but year round. So we have things like, adding our pronouns into Slack, adding things like our pronouns into our emails and things like that. But what we're also really focusing on is gender inclusive language for trans, non-binary, queer,
Matthew, you're going in and out of mute.
I don't know why it's doing that. It's going a little. Oh, is it good now?
Yeah,
cool.
You're good now.
Cool. So with that, what we're also doing is gender inclusive language, like releasing Slack bots that help people to not utilize language like you guys. But our Pride leader, our ERG lead, Austin, he has done really well with his cohort around things like, we have a speaker coming in and doing 3 separate trainings throughout the year to really focus on Pride and everything from allyship tips, but then also having affinity spaces where we can also, as queer people, talk through our experiences in the workplace, talk through our experiences that really tell us how we come to work and inform us how we come to work. Some really cool things they're also doing is they're doing a fundraiser around getting t-shirts created. So we were able to get some really fun t-shirts created for Pride specifically. And we're doing a fundraiser for that to help support Rainbow Railroad, who help queer folks escape from countries that maybe are dangerous to them. So our ERG is really trying to do 365. They're really trying to keep conversations going, keep people invested. But then I think the more important piece is to invite people in, right? Sometimes it can be really scary for folks who don't understand the queer community or who don't know queer people in their day-to-day lives. Especially our company, we're a 100% remote company and a work best company. So we want to ensure we're building those really strong connections. And our ERG is doing that by doing little bits of pieces and big things all across the org, which has been fun to see.
I love that, especially the piece about inviting people in. I think that can be so important and key. I want to go ahead and pass it over to Luis as well. You founded Washington, D.C.'s Pride ERG, and you're currently Visa's Global Community Chair for your Pride ERG as well. What part of your strategy is global? And what work is important to remain in that local office to leaders across different geographies?
Yes, as a global company, the dynamic is a little bit different, especially when you look into the different market. But, in general, our purpose is to lift everyone everywhere. We're building an environment where diverse background and perspective are celebrated so we can drive success inside and outside of our communities. It's been one of our goals throughout many years, and we have been honored to receive the 100% corporate equity index and best place to work for LGBT by the HRC. And we truly have great leaders and great HR partners who support our goals. We, at a global level, we have tried to make improvements, especially on our healthcare for LGBT employees. Especially everything related to the access to fertility, adoption, surrogacy covers options. And we just recently announced, the expansion of our parental leave, which was a huge benefit for all of our employees, no matter the country of residence, whether you're a birth parent or if your child arrives via birth or adoption. We extended to set a minimum paid of new bonding leave of 14 weeks now globally. Now, when you look into the markets, especially, it is so different because each region has so many different nuances that you have to partner not just within the organization with different teams, but with global government agencies and healthcare facilities and institutions. But we have done a great work working with our legal marketing comms also to update all of our new assets to include the brown and the black stripe to our marketing materials. Like someone said before, a more inclusive language, being mindful of that, providing trainings, especially in regions where the subject is a little bit sensitive, but at least, so we want to make that sense of inclusivity, that employees, feel safe when they come into the office, even though the political or cultural situation of the country that they're in might be a little bit different.
Thank you so much. KT, I see you snapping over there. I agree. I'm here for those inclusive healthcare benefits. I do want to shift a little bit to some of the challenges that we might be facing as ERG leaders. So KT, I want to start with you. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have as an LGBTQ plus ERG leader today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it really lends itself to the question that Rob asked in the chat of how do you navigate we need corporate approval for that response. I think the number one thing that a company needs to support its ERGs is that support, and the sponsorship really needs to come from the very top. Like, it's very challenging for us as ERG leaders to come in and try to support education of the company and support its queer team members when there's no buy-in from the top. So I think that is probably the first challenge that ERGs need to tackle. Definitely need to make sure we get that support from the top. And then, since the pandemic hit and so many people are remote, I think the next biggest challenge is really helping to figure out how we take those the smaller events that used to bring people together and help build that community. And how do we make those available to everybody who's remote and really to a global audience now, because we want everybody to be able to participate. And then if you are working at a company and you are dipping your toe into participating in your ERGs, I would say the third challenge is really just getting participation. So I think if you're ready to be a part of an ERG, go full force, volunteer for helping with an event or even just taking notes during a meeting or anything like that. I think the participation challenge is real for sure.
Absolutely. Alisha, I want to pass that question to you as well. What are some of those big challenges that you have as an LGBTQ plus ERG leader today?
Yeah, absolutely. I will echo what KT just mentioned of the engagement piece. I think mentioning the remote world, we have Zoom fatigue that we're battling against. That's a very real thing. And people getting on maybe after hours and doing something that's an event is tough, because there's definitely fatigue that happens during the day of being in meetings on your daily work. So I think just thinking outside the box, and we were all thrown into this remote world, a lot of us at our companies, in March of 2020, and having to really adapt to that as, Pride ERG or ERG leaders, of how to engage people in a remote and virtual world. So I think that's definitely been a challenge. And I'd say just individually, I know that's kind of the second part of that question, and I'll change that word to challenge, is making sure that I stay visible, like as a person that's a part of the LGBTQ plus community and being in management, making sure that I'm visible and I'm telling my story as much as possible, because I think representation is so powerful. So making sure that that's something I'm intentional about, of being on the Pride Leadership Council and just in my daily work. I'm in a sales organization, and sometimes the LGBTQ plus community isn't represented well in that world. And that's something that I've been challenged with and throughout my career. So I try to be as visible as possible, so people see people who are like them in positions of leadership. So twofold as far as ERG challenges and just individual challenges that I'm making sure I'm intentional about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really helpful add-on as well. I'll double tap that as well in terms of the representation, especially in sales organizations. If you're in a place where you feel like you can be representative and where you can be present and be a voice for other people, be out, be loud, be as loud as you can be, because that makes a really huge difference for everyone who isn't in a place to be loud yet. We are having a lot of questions pop up in the chat as well around engagement. How do you drive engagement? How do you drive engagement with planning and in these planning crews? Want to kind of give that question to all of the panelists and see if anyone has anything they want to add around that.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it, and I'll expand on what Alisha was saying about thinking outside of the box. I think as great as conversations and panels and discussions are, people want something different, and I think that's what drives the turnout. I mean, we obviously food always helps. So we always have like pizzas, or we partner with the local Chipotle, and then we ask them for some type of donations, and they're more than willing usually to help. So that's a tip right there. The other thing is we do every year a movie screening, LGBT themed movie screening. So we go to our local movie theater. We rent an auditorium, and then we project the movie, and then after that we do like a happy hour to discuss and talk about the meeting and what people thought and what were their takeouts and stuff like that. And that has been a huge success. We have also implemented a monthly newsletter, and with the same topic, of keeping the 365 years, queerness celebration. So every month we send like a newsletter globally, and we talk on different topics, either a specific date that is being celebrated that day, or any highlights or whatever our other offices are doing. So I think that sparks a lot of new ideas, and people really look for those opportunities. We do virtual concerts, with local LGBT singers and performance, drag queens, bingo. So those are fun and cool ideas that people are always willing to help them disconnect a little bit.
I'd love
as far as engagement, we try at 24 Hour Fitness take the top down and bottom up approach. So from the top down, each of the ERGs has an executive sponsor, and this is a member of the executive leadership team. So generally one of the corporate VPs is a member and a sponsor of each of the ERGs. This ensures that our work on the ERGs, inclusion, diversity, equity, is always a topic at executive leadership team meetings. Now, from the bottom up, one thing the Pride 24 ERG did recently was Earth Day. We sponsored cleaning up all of our clubs, our parking lots, the sidewalks, trash. Some clubs planted trees, so we're out there with our Pride 24 t-shirts, just cleaning up trash, which when members were coming and going, were saying, hey, what are you doing? And this sparked conversation. we're participating and sponsoring an Earth Day cleanup of our clubs and the environment. So things like that, it was the same time across the time zones from Hawaii to New York. So that kept us engaged, knowing that every club, something was going on, sponsored by Pride 24 for Earth Day. So just some activities like that got us up and outside the clubs, moving around, and then again, the executive sponsorship are just some ways that we are driving engagement, both from executive leadership, but also from our frontline staff.
I'd love to jump into and just kind of offer a little insight. So if you look in the chat, Austin Nelson, that is our ERG lead for Pride at TextNow. Not only does he kill it in his recruiting duties, he also kills it in his Pride ERG duties. And so I can answer some of the questions that I saw popping up. You know, with overseeing ERGs, if I had the answer for really good engagement, I could start my own consulting firm, right? It's a very hard piece to crack. I think a few things. One, thinking intersectionality around your employee resource groups. How can you combine forces, right? Especially if you don't have as large of a budget, or if you are struggling in maybe ideas, right? Finding especially those ERGs that maybe have more members or are more, have had a longer time in the org. The real piece to engagement, though, is it has to be managers and it has to be leadership pushing this as a piece, right? So one of the things that we've been sure to do at TextNow, this was our first year. So I got hired about 9 months ago, and this was the first EDI full-time position for TextNow. My first year of asking for budget, I asked all 3 of my ERGs, what is your budget, and shoot for the sky. And they each asked for $12,000 around that. And I asked and I was given it, right, for each of the ERG leads. Our managers and the way we do our yearly professional reviews, whatever you call them, like check-ins, yada, yada. Part of that culture ad now is being a part of an ERG, being a part of it in some form or fashion, because it's creating that culture, right? So engagement has to start with your upper levels really being into it. And while lip service is lovely, dollars speak way more, right? What we're also currently working on is ensuring our ERG leads get compensated. So that's being kind of woven into their yearly review. So while money doesn't make the world go round, money makes us walk a little bit easier in life. And so that's what I'd really encourage all of you to do, is that you can see all of these engagement scores go up. You can see your ERGs being more excited because they know the company cares, right? And it's not just a marketing tool, a recruitment tool, or lip service, you know? I also saw for smaller budgets. So my side hustle is Awesomely Authentic. I do LGBTQ plus like presentations, and I created something called the DEI Speakers Bureau because I would ask for a presenter and they were like 10 grand. And I was like, girl, I have like, that's like double my entire yearly budget. So the DEI Speakers Bureau is a free resource for any of you to check out. Most of these folks will be under 5 grand for any of their different events. And they're sourced just from like LinkedIn and my own personal connections. So hopefully that helps as well. But yeah, hopefully that gives like some insight on the overarching engagement piece.
That is a beautifully helpful resource. Thank you, Matthew. I imagine if anyone else has any suggestions for speakers that you might want to add to that list, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn to be included. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. This is super, super helpful. One more question on the topic of this engagement piece that I saw come up in the chat as well. By the nature of the chezie organization and the AllVoices organization, I know that we have a lot of HR leaders, people leaders, HR teams in this call. So what is one of the, what are some of the best ways that y'all have seen HR leaders and HR teams best support ERG organizations? Of course, Matthew, to your point, going and helping ask for that budget is particularly helpful. Katie, I want to pass it over to you and see if you have any insight on that as well.
Yeah, I think Lewis talked about this earlier, but working towards those like LGBTQIA plus inclusive health benefits is huge. Also, something that I was just so stoked to see when I did my interviewing with Dutchie is it's as simple as like during the process of setting up the interview, they asked me for my pronouns. How dope was that? I was just like, just barely getting into the interviews, and I was like, boom, I'm meant to be here. Like, I should be here. And those things just make it to where, you know, when you have queer people who are applying, they automatically know that your company is focused on providing like a really inclusive experience. And so I think that's huge. And then on top of that, just HR people participating in the ERG, like that was huge when I was at Mindbody. You know, even if they're participating as an ally, it's so huge to be able to see that like the people who are in the HR space are also really excited about participating. And it humanizes your HR folks, which everyone needs more humanization of HR. But it also like helps the other people who are participating see that the HR team really supports the initiatives and is going along the ride with you, you know?
Absolutely. That's a really, really helpful ad. I love humanizing the HR teams, and I love the idea of bringing more policy and process into the situation so that we have some of those ideas. Louis, what are you thinking on that front as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to add three little things that, you know, I've seen that have made a huge impact, you know, since we started establishing it. One of them is, you know, we have incorporated key IND metrics as part of every employee goals, you know, for their annual review, as well as part of our company scorecard, like the overall strategy of the company, keeping the inclusion and diversity piece as a key component, as it's the same as revenue, the same as, you know, gains and all those things. It has to play the same role in each one of the companies. So it is the mindset that evolves, you know, every year and it gets improved. But, you know, I think it ultimately can get done because, I mean, we've done it. The other thing is that we also made sure that throughout the interview process of new hires, we have a diverse panel. So everybody, you know, someone with different ideas, different backgrounds, different genders, you know, so it's not one type of, you know, profile, you know, hiring people. So that's very helpful. And the other thing that we also have done is once the employee comes aboard during the new hire process, we have implemented a toolkit for ERG. So right off the gate, you already know how we approach, you know, diversity and inclusion, what are the different ERGs that you can be part of, what do they do, and what impact they make in the communities and inside the company. So you already, you know, have a vast option of things that you can, you know, be part of. So I think that's very exciting for new hires.
MJ, can I add to my?
Please do, yes.
Okay, I'm like sitting here like just thinking of like all the million things that HR people could help with. But another thing is putting together some sort of documentation or process for people who are transitioning. I'm really passionate about supporting like the trans and non-binary community, especially in a professional setting. It's so challenging for them to, you know, be going through this process in their lives, let alone having to worry about like how they're not going to navigate it at work. It's huge for them to actually have some sort of documentation that tells them how to start so that they don't have to go to a ton of different people when they're in this like incredibly vulnerable space and have to like make it up as they go along, you know? So I would add that to how HR can help as well.
I love that. Another one for my fan of documentation and process, and I think that it can be so helpful, especially to organizations that are growing. Be thinking about how can I put this into place, to your point, so that employees don't feel like they have to come find somebody to answer these questions. Alisha, I think you might have had something to add too. I'll let you do that really quick as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jerry brought this up about having executive sponsors partnering with ERGs. I think it's also equally important to have an HRBP, HR representation that's partnering also with the ERGs, because there's things that come up that members may come to a leadership council with that we just can't answer because we're not a part of HR and we're just not in those those HR rooms, right? So having someone who's there to advocate for us has been really helpful. I know at Zillow, that's something that we have in place. And if there's a benefits question, if there's something that's maybe missing from benefits, us having that partnership and making sure there's a clear line of communication, that's something I'd highly suggest, and something that I know personally that has been really helpful for me.
I'd like to piggyback on that, because again, yes, having HR partnering with us is absolutely essential. One thing that we are trying to establish now is a system of mentorship. So a member of the Pride 2-4 Council being mentors for other members of the community in collaboration with HR. Because as you said, not all of us are HR savvy about HR policies, but both ways, HR referring people to us that need mentorship, sort of in a buddy system, and vice versa about LGBTQA plus issues that perhaps we could address better than HR, but then again, HR being able to address HR issues. And one thing that we've already implemented as a result of that, though, is making sure that every single club has at least one all gender restroom. So we have managed to get that in each of our clubs, at least one. So
that's amazing. I'm here for some extra mentorship as well. That can be such a powerful tool for everybody involved, mentors and mentees alike. Jerry, let's stick with you a little bit and let's shift this conversation a little bit to intersectionality. That's a conversation that I think we hear come up a lot, especially around the Pride conversation now. Tell us about your intersectional approach to this work as an ERG leader and how you think about the work of ERGs in the workplace from that perspective.
Well, thanks, MJ. I'd like to preface this by saying that one of my key mentors, in addition to my parents growing up, and I was very fortunate that, was Martin Luther King. So I was old enough to have known him and have had a few private conversations with him. But one of his philosophy, which is actually mine, is about the interconnectedness of life. And there's one thing that he said, which is has stuck with me ever since I was a kid. And that's essentially, I cannot be all that I ought to be unless you are everything that you ought to be. And that is the interconnectedness of life. So from an intersectional approach, I've made sure that I'm a member of each of our ERGs, whether I'm a member of that particular class or an ally, because allyship is so important. So I think it's important that in companies where there are several ERGs that belong to all of them, that's an intersectional approach, because none of us is just one thing. We're not just in the LGBTQ plus community. Perhaps we're in a different community. I certainly belong an active member of our Black ERG. So that interconnectedness is essential, and it helps all the ERGs survive, because either through direct representation or being an ally. Perhaps being a trainer, I'm in a unique position because I work with team members as clients as well as our members. And I always bring up our ERG work in terms of our training sessions, because they're interested in hearing about my life. I think that being upfront and open and honest is a responsibility of an ERG member, taking advantage of large opportunities as well as small opportunities to talk about and interact with those that you come into contact with. So that team approach, that intersection approach is absolutely essential, because we all have something to offer one another. And it's important that allyship, I can't mention how essential that is. And so I think all of the ERGs should make sure that every member of each ERG is a member of every other ERG. I think that is survival as a group, because ERGs may have different disciplines, but overarching, there are similar goals. There are similar reasons for existence. There are similar needs, whether it be support, mentorship, funding, visibility, calls to action. And I think it's important for us to participate in the activities of each ERG. That really means so much to the members of that ERG. So intersectional, I think, is something that is going to be talked about more and more, because all of us actually intersect so many different other aspects of life.
It makes me think, you know, with TextNow, we're doing an event this month for Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, as well as Mental Health Awareness Month. And even thinking through, you know, the mental health issues that the queer community, right? We are at much more risk for suicide and all these other things, and collaborating on speakers who are at the intersectionality of those identities are important. But I think especially as a remote workforce at TextNow, and we say fully remote, we mean your butt can be wherever and we're cool with it, right? Not like you have to be in one of these cities. I think we should think about intersectionality too, about how do you invite more people into the conversation. So a prime example is thinking about folks who, if you have a diverse workforce that are all across the United States and across Canada or wherever, there are going to be people who are in more rural areas, right? So one thing I've done with orgs that are in more rural areas through my side hustle is I bring in country music and queer people who do bluegrass music to kind of create those connections. So really think about the intersectionality, not just around our ideas of race, gender, age, LGBTQ status, all of those different things. So think about geography, right? Think about people's lived experiences in different countries. Because what you're going to do then is you're creating that really nice connection to other people in your org who maybe didn't realize that the queer identity intersected with their identity in some form or fashion, you know? That's really the key here is in ERG work, sometimes where it is kind of a business piece, we forget that what we're really doing here is just teaching and broadening people's minds and their hearts around identities, right? So think about where you can like intersect that. Think about how that can be pushed in different directions. And again, I think this is also going to be even more important as Gen Z starts coming more and more into the workforce. When they look at their identity in corporate spaces, gender binaries don't work. Them being policed on the way they look don't work, right? Like, and companies are going to learn this either the easy way or the hard way. And so thinking about how all of those things around age even is going to be really imperative to the success of any organization and the success even of any ERG, right?
I love that. We're getting a lot of +1s in the comments and also a lot of requests for those country queer recommendations. So we're going to have to put together a playlist for that one for sure, Matthew.
Myra Burns, she's amazing.
I do want to open that up to the rest of the panel as well, because this does seem to be such a powerful conversation. What does that intersectionality look like? You know, I'm seeing allyship accomplices in the chat. That's a really good way to think about it as well. How are you inviting more people into your, LGBTQ plus ERGs? And how are you participating in some, as an ERG leader, in some of those, intersectional places?
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about engagement and those things. Like, I think we should be, if you're involved in one, you should be supporting all, right? Because we know how much effort and how much it takes to put an event together, to put certain things together. Like, we should all be supporting each other. And I think, Matthew, you were talking about combining budgets. Like, that's a powerful thing. That's something that we've done at Zillow of like, hey, maybe we don't have enough, but there's some intersectionality here where we can, partner with Billow, partner with our women's network in different ways, and getting creative there and thinking outside the box with that. And I think, again, it just brings more people in, because especially the LGBTQ plus community just has a ton of intersectionality. And I think honoring that, and love to hear like the Asian Pacific Islanders month, like that, like doing different things around that, I think just supports each other, make sure that all of our events are more successful and that we're bringing more people in. Like Matthew, I think you mentioned as well, love that term. And I think that that's something we should be constantly thinking about. And also making sure that there's education that's happening. If there's that middle management and leadership buy-in that we need, making sure that there's continued education that we can provide and get some buy-in with, because it's great if we're bringing a ton of people into the company that are a part of the community, but if we don't have managers that are educated in LGBTQ plus different issues and different subjects, then we're not going to be able to manage those people well and retain those people. So I think that there's definitely some intersectionality there as well.
Yeah, you know, I particularly love the intersectionality piece, and I think it is a good opportunity for companies to stop looking at, you know, ERGs as different type of buckets, because I mean, at the end of the day, Pride is just not, you know, Pride Month, June. We're, you know, Black History Month. We are Spanish Heritage Month. We're Chinese New Year's. We're Veterans Day. We're everything. So I think that you know, all of those intersectionality needs to, you know, a safe space to coexist. So I think that it's difficult also to accomplish because of the, you know, budget topic that we have talked about. But in my case, for example, everyone who has a VP or SVP title at Visa, they probably got an email from me. Like, hey, you know, I need this. And it's okay if they say no, because they didn't know, they didn't plan for it. But that's not the end of the conversation. There's a follow-up. Okay, how can we make this happen next year? Like, we make this every year. Can you support us next year? Can you include this in your budget planning for next year? So you start that conversation with them. It's not a flat out no, and then you close that loop. You know, it's an ongoing conversation, because we have to partner with the leaders of your organization. And by the same token, one thing that we have experienced is we have to start looking at intersectionality, not just inside your company, but outside your company. Let me tell you, your clients, you have such a vast network of people that you can reach out to. Your clients, believe it or not, they don't just want to talk about business and money. They're dying to learn how your organization drives diversity and inclusion. So partner with them, talk to them in your calls about all of these different topics. Hey, what are you doing for Pride Month? So, you know, it creates that bonding. We have made a lot of, you know, initiative with our biggest clients like Chase, Goldman Sachs, our smaller community credit unions, merchants like United Airlines. And, you know, so there's a lot of opportunities that you probably work with many of these clients and you probably haven't thought about it. So it's good for you to start that conversation, and you'll be surprised of many great things that can come out of that.
Absolutely. And it's a very good reminder to, you know, we find ourselves looking for some of this support from executive leadership, and Alisha, being in sales, I'm sure you can agree, don't just accept the first no, think about how can we make this happen in the future as well. Along those same lines, when we're having some of those conversations with leadership, when we're having some of those conversations around budget, around the ERGs and success, we're often asked, what are your KPIs? How are you defining success? Alisha, I want to pass that to you specifically. As the Director of Career Development for Zillow's Pride ERG, how are you specifically measuring success in that role?
Yeah, you mentioned KPIs. I think making sure that those are not only aligned to what we're wanting to accomplish within the Pride Network ERG, but also company-wide. So what are some EMB goals that the company has, and how are we incorporating ourselves into that through our KPIs? And I know, for example, one of them is making sure that we have more people within the community, LGBTQ plus community, coming into the company and then getting into positions of leadership. So things like partnering with HR to make sure we've got a referral program to where it's clear that this is a referral from somebody who's a member of the Pride Network ERG. And so we've created like a hashtag that goes on to the referral, that it's kind of moved to the top of the list, that they'll get at least a call. So they'll get the screen of those things. So making sure that we're bringing more people in. If our goal is to have more people in leadership, we need to make sure there's enough people coming into the company that are a part of the community. And that's engaging our allies, that's engaging members of our community. And I think just making sure that, you know, we're making sure that there's that line of communication with executives, making sure we have their buy-in to give us opportunities to be able to get more people in. And so I think it's making sure we're hitting those goals, those KPIs, and that we've got action steps to get there throughout the year so they don't fall to the wayside.
Yeah, I think in at TextNow, one of the things that, I encourage is setting KPIs that are maintainable, maybe like 1 or 2, right? Because most folks are doing this on top of what they're supposed to be, what they were hired to do, right? And I never want to make it not fun or not enjoyable, because most folks are doing this because it's an enjoyable piece. And as a side piece, if you are currently in an employee resource group and it's a struggle and you feel like you're fighting tooth and nail, vote with your feet, right? Find another place where you can do this work at an org that supports you more. You have that ability. TextNow, we do it over at our side, so come on over. But I would say, when we look at KPIs specifically, I think that recruitment piece is really good. It's a huge part, right? Again, Gen Z, they're coming out more as queer. It's something they're really looking at. TextNow, simply something as small as what we've been doing as going into the Out in Tech Slack and just posting the job periodically in our job section, but then also being very, writing like blogs about what we're doing around queer spaces, right? And around queer ideas and pronouns and things we're doing internally, right? So that way people have something to actually find about what it is you're actually having these conversations on. Last year, our org was at 12% for LGBT representation. We just did our most recent survey for representation in January, and we're up to 16%. So I think those little things definitely help a lot, but with the KPIs, keep them manageable, keep them simple. And that way it can be, one, you are still demonstrating your value to the higher ups, but 2, it's something that will, again, make sure it's manageable for yourself and it doesn't hurt your own mental health while you're trying to get this work done too.
Absolutely. Finding those manageable KPIs is a difficult part. I saw a couple comments about underestimating just how much work being an ERG leader can be, especially when we are thinking about voting with our feet, when we're thinking about moving to different organizations. Katie, I want to pass that to you a little bit since you just moved to Dutchie. As you get familiar with that role, what are some things that you hope to bring over from your previous role at Mindbody Pride and share with Dutchie and take some of those learnings as well?
Yeah, thanks, MJ. I am really right now in a space, and we were talking about this kind of before the webinar started, where I'm like trying to make sure that I understand my role and understand what the folks in the Pride ERG are already doing. I don't want to come in like, I'm here, I want to take over. But also I'm really excited to get started. So I kind of am like, knock, knock, let me in. But some of the things that I'm really excited to like kind of share, before I left Mindbody, we were doing a huge push on pronouns. I think I see several pronouns in your Zoom profiles now. I would love to pick that up at Dutchie. I think especially for like trans and non-binary community members, it's huge to have that inclusive like community where pronouns are not just something that we talk about when we're trans or non-binary. It's just a normal part of life, and we put it out there so that there's no questioning, no misgendering, no mispronouncing, regardless of what you're doing. Like, it doesn't have to be something that everybody focuses on, but we can be respectful and just by including it, right? Whether or not you are they or he or she or whatever you identify with, like, just add it on there. It takes 2 seconds. So I'd love to push that. And then I also would love to just continue my work on supporting the trans and non-binary community members. I think, they have a really unique set of needs. And I think it can be really challenging for some people who haven't had that exposure to those people. It can be really challenging, like just accepting the concept, let alone like getting comfortable with it and being able to like just have even a professional relationship with somebody who identifies that way. So those are the 2 areas that I really want to focus on. Having said that, I'm sure Dutchie is killing it, because everything I see about what they do so far, I love the company and everything that they're doing. So I don't want to say that they're not doing that already, but that is where I want to kind of focus my efforts.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that you can come in and share those learnings and also just be really excited about this organization as well. Well, fantastic. As we look at wrapping up this conversation, I want to take this opportunity to have each of the panels share any calls of action that you have. What is your call of action to companies as they think about supporting their LGBTQIA plus employees and queerness 365 days a year? Jerry, I want to start with you on that one.
Thanks, MJ. Well, one of my calls to action, and I keep shouting it over and over, regardless of budget, and budgets are always essential for any organization, and particularly 24-hour fitness, because we just emerged successfully from bankruptcy, and so a lot of changes, but that inclusion, diversity, equity are essential for the financial health and wealth of any company, because you can look at it about how do we make a budget just for ERGs, but it's much broader than that. ERGs, I think, are a reflection, and in a way, it's like the top of the iceberg. It's the visible part, but it's the invisible part, the part that's below the water. That ID&E is so essential for again, like I said, the financial health and well-being of any organization. And I think as a result of having heard a lot of us saying that, one of our big calls to action did result in having an executive member of the executive leadership team. We now have a vice president for corporate social responsibility, and that individual's job is, among others, to make sure that each of our clubs is in a community. It's to make sure that we don't just exist in that community, but we actually belong and network with that community. So how can we help with homeless initiatives or beautification projects or blood drives or pride parades or pride events, so that we are not just existing in a community, but being a part of that community. And so calls to action is to not just be a health and fitness organization, but actually be members of community. And it doesn't have to be where a club is. We have many team members who are remote and live in areas where we don't have any clubs. So we want to be members of those communities, because as long as we have an employee in a town, and if that town maybe only has 20 people, then we want to be a partner and connected with that community. So calls to action means that we should be both within the company, but also where the company exists and part of those communities. And the greater diversity we have, the greater success we're going to have as a company in terms of delivering on our fitness goals, but also financial solvency. I mean, diversity is essential for health and well-being of any organization. And that is my call to action, that you can't just look at it in terms of dollars. It's got to be the wealth behind inclusion, diversity, and equity. Tremendous wealth there.
Absolutely. Diversity is not a nice to have, it is a need to have. Louis, what is your call to action to organizations?
Yeah, I think, from a national, like North America, United States perspective, I mean, we have enough nuances, with different states and legislations and rules and stuff that it's complex enough. But I think at a global level, it gets even worse. I think companies should invest in I&D. They should start looking and putting the dollars to make their employees, feel included and have a diverse, pool of employees. I think aside from the work that all of us, I&D leaders doing on our organization, I think it's great. But, it would be great to have someone who officially leads and is responsible, for making things happen. And if you have someone, if companies invest someone in the local markets, I think it goes along well. I think we're fortunate to have all the great progress that we have in North America. But when you look at regions like Asia and, LAC, who are a lot, years behind us still, You cannot bring someone with the North America mentality to start working in those markets because it simply is not going to work. You need someone who knows the culture. I mean, it's prime simple example is, you know, the pronouns. Like in Spanish, it's very difficult to pronounce, you know, because you have different type of things. There's other languages that don't even have, you know, feminine or masculine. So how do you manage those different nuances? So I think the companies need to start investing in local leaders that, you know, can drive these efforts of I&D further.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, as we round out these last few minutes, let's rapid fire our calls to action. KT, what is your call to action for organizations?
My call to action is hold your company accountable for putting together a roadmap for doing some of these initiatives. Just like your product has a roadmap, your team has a roadmap of what they want to do in the next year or 2 years or whatever. Like all of these things seem really overwhelming when you look at having to do all of it, right? Like all of the HR stuff we talked about, everything that we talked about in this webinar. But if you put it on a roadmap and say, okay, 3 months from now, this is what we're going to do. 6 months from now, this is what we're going to do. And then hold your leaders accountable to actually hitting those goals. I think you just taking baby steps and biting off little chunks, you can make a big difference over the course of a year or whatever the time frame is. So make a roadmap, people.
Yeah, roadmap and accountability. Matthew, what about you?
Yeah, DEI is not scary. It should be embraced. If you don't embrace it, you are not going to win the talent wars. It's just not going to happen. It's what people are looking for. So I would say definitely make sure you are leading with empathy, leading with the thoughts around community, not thinking around how we can control, right? And I want you to really give your ERGs that space they should be able to speak out whenever there are laws that are targeting them, and you as a company should support them, supporting the ERG to make those comments. You should also allow for affinity spaces. Some things I've heard in the rumblings here and there, different orgs, is legal won't let us have spaces that are just for queer people. Everyone has to be involved. That is bullshit. You should have a space that is for you and your community to feel safe, to have conversations that affect you as a professional. So don't let people feed that to you either. Really, really stand up for those spaces for yourself, and pay your ERG leads, compensate them. A free t-shirt does not cut it. You need to pay them for that work, and I can help tell you how much you should pay them.
Fantastic. Alisha, bring us home. What's your call to action?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest lesson is use your ERGs as resources. Like if there's a policy change, if there's a benefits change, is this inclusive to the LGBTQ plus community? We can help you find those gaps quickly. We just need to be brought in as well. So just as much as we'll bring you in, bring us in those conversations as well, and make sure we're represented in those conversations as well. So that way we can make sure everyone we're bringing in actually does feel included and they feel like they belong and can do their best work because they can be their true selves. So is there healthcare? Is their pronouns a part of the process where not only trans and non-binary folks have to give them? Do cisgender people have to give them as well? And making sure that there's that environment of inclusion. So just open communication with the ERGs on what's happening at a company level will make you more successful overall.
Amazing. What a fantastic panel. I've really enjoyed my time with all of you today. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar about how to authentically honor Pride and celebrate queerness 365 days a year. If you have any questions for myself or any of the panelists, please feel free to reach out to us via LinkedIn. Also, if you have any questions specifically about AllVoices or chezie, please reach out to myself or Toby as well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Bye.
Thank you.